I'm Lena Brooks, 37, a paramedic in Portland, living with my 8-year-old son, Noah. For years, I carried my family's burdens, paying debts, co-signing loans, staying silent to keep the peace. But at a dinner in the house I helped my sister buy, one sentence from my niece made me realize, staying quiet too long can make you disappear. I still remember the sound of their laughter, sharp, thin, and cold, like wine glasses clinking. My sister's house was glowing under warm light, smelling of new oak floors and citrus room spray. Everything felt staged. I was pouring water for Noah when Olivia, my 11-year-old niece, lifted her chin, lips moving slowly. "We don't sit with people like you." No sound, just that quiet motion of her mouth. And then the soft ripple of grown-up laughter, the kind that stings because everyone pretends it's harmless. I didn't laugh. I set my glass down, pushed back my chair, and took my son's hand. His palm was warm and trembling. "We're leaving," I said, barely above a whisper. As we stepped outside, the smell of grilled meat and cheap perfume followed us into the night. My phone buzzed. "Dad, Rick. Payment for the utilities goes through tomorrow, right?" I stared at the message until my heartbeat slowed, then typed back, "Not my problem." No punctuation, no emoji. Just a clean break between who I used to be and who I was about to become. Tomorrow morning, I'd send one email and watch every single face change color. I hadn't planned to go. My gut warned me it would end badly, but Noah had begged all week to see his cousins. He missed them, their chaos, the Lego cities that used to take over my living room, before the adults learned how to turn warmth into tension. I gave in. For him, not for them. We drove 30 minutes out to Lake Oswego, to my sister's new house, the one she bragged about online with captions like, "Built from hard work and faith." I knew better. Her credit had been destroyed before I fixed it. I'd co-signed her lease, negotiated with the landlord, and wired $18,500 to cover the deposit. She called it a blessing. She never called it help. The place smelled of new wood and store-bought candles. Every corner gleamed, beige walls, quartz countertops cool and spotless, glasses chiming like props in a commercial. Madison greeted me with a smile tight enough to snap. "You made it," she said, voice sugary but strained. Noah stood beside me clutching a box of cookies he'd picked himself. "Should I still give it to them?" He whispered. "Maybe later," I said. We sat far from the center of the table, close enough to watch but never belong. From there, I could see the whole production, the curated laughter, the perfect lighting, the illusion of family. Noah leaned toward Olivia, showing her the game he'd coded. She didn't even glance up. A minute later, her mouth shaped the words that cracked the evening in half. "We don't sit with people like you." That was the moment everything clicked into focus. All the small slights I'd brushed off weren't accidents. They were the system, and I was done feeding it. On the drive home, Noah fell asleep holding the cookie box closed against his chest. Streetlights swept across his face in silent rhythm. I kept my eyes on the road and thought, tomorrow, one email. That's all it'll take. Morning light leaked through the blinds, thin and colorless. I made coffee, not because I needed caffeine, but because the act of brewing, it felt like control, something steady, something that didn't talk back. Noah was still asleep, one arm flung across his stuffed dinosaur. The cookie box from last night sat untouched on the counter. I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat at rest. I already knew what to write. No preamble, no emotion, just a sentence clean enough to slice through the years of pretending. "Begin the lease transfer process today." That was it. One line. No greeting, no sign-off. I addressed it directly to Ethan Cole, my brother-in-law, the man who'd spent last night pouring wine and laughing while his daughter humiliated my son. I didn't CC Madison. She'd see it soon enough. I hovered a second before pressing send, not out of doubt, but out of finality. Once it left my inbox, there'd be no pretending we were family glued together by kindness. We were business partners, and the contract had just changed. The message sent with a faint whoosh. I watched the timestamp mark 8:42 a.m. At 8:44, the little read notification popped up. 90 seconds. That's how long it took for Ethan to see it. And then, nothing. No reply, no question, not even a why. Just silence. I sat back, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the far-off sound of a garbage truck rumbling down the street. My hands didn't shake. I thought they might, but they didn't. There was a strange calm in knowing the balance had shifted, that the invisible scaffolding I'd been holding up was finally creaking under its own weight. By the time Noah woke, the morning had settled into ordinary quiet. He padded into the kitchen, hair sticking up, and asked if we were still going to Grandma's this weekend. "Maybe not," I said, sliding a pancake onto his plate. "We'll see." He nodded, unfazed, too young to sense what had just started unraveling behind the curtain. While he ate, I checked my inbox again. Still no reply. I could almost picture Ethan showing Madison the email, her smile stiffening, her fingers hovering over her phone, trying to decide whether to call me or call the bank first. I didn't care which came first. The rules had changed. They just didn't know it yet. Outside, a soft Portland drizzle began to tap against the window pane, steady, patient, inevitable. I watched the drops trail down the glass and thought, that's how it begins. Quiet, ordinary, unstoppable. At 9:40 a.m., my phone lit up with a local number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but instinct made me swipe. Miss Brooks? This is Mr. Feld, building management for Juniper and Rye. We received a lease transfer request this morning. I just need to confirm you want it processed. His voice was professional, the kind people use when they sense tension under polite words. Yes, I said. Effective today. He hesitated. Then the late fee liability, 2.4% monthly, moves to the primary signer, Mr. Ethan Cole. Correct. I could almost hear the click of paperwork shuffling. He thanked me and hung up. My pulse didn't spike. It just felt clean. By 11:15 a.m., my phone started vibrating nonstop. The family group chat was lighting up like a fire alarm. Madison, what is this? Why would you, Mom? Can we please not do this in text? Dad? Just fix it, Lena. I didn't answer any of them. I scrolled once, pressed leave group, and watched the screen return to quiet gray. The silence that followed was beautiful. Around noon, I made lemon pancakes for Noah. The smell of browned butter filled the kitchen. The syrup hissed as it hit the hot pan. Noah perched on a stool, kicking his feet while talking about a robot arm he wanted to build. I nodded. Let the sweetness of the moment coat the bitterness from earlier. At 3:20 p.m., an email arrived from Cascadia Credit Union. Confirmation, account manager access removed. Automatic payments for Rick Brooks terminated as of yesterday. I disabled the auto-pay that kept my father's utilities current. I wasn't sabotaging him. I was returning ownership. For years, I'd managed his bills because he said online banking was too confusing. He'd never once asked how much it cost me in time or money. Now the system would send reminders directly to him. Accountability, not revenge. By early evening, the Portland light was fading into that dull silver haze it gets before rain. I was washing dishes when my phone buzzed again. 6:55 p.m. Text from Mom Carla. Your father's card was declined for the water bill. Fix it before they shut it off. No, ? No greeting. Just another order dressed as expectation. I set the phone face down on the counter and dried my hands. The faucet kept running. I watched the water swirl, thought about how many times I'd rushed to fix everything before anyone even felt the consequences. Not this time. Noah called from the living room, asking if we could watch the shark documentary again. I said, sure. He brought a blanket, curled beside me, fingers still sticky with syrup. The world shrank to the sound of waves and narrator voices. Somewhere across town, Madison was probably pacing her immaculate kitchen, realizing the lease transfer wasn't a bluff. Ethan would be doing math, trying to remember how late fees compound. Rick would be on hold with the utility company, confused why the card didn't work. Carla would be composing a longer message she wouldn't send yet, all of it spinning quietly because I stopped spinning for them. The laptop on the coffee table pinged new mail from Mr. Feld again. Transfer acknowledgement complete. Documents to be signed by receiving party within 48 hours. I closed it without reading further. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for doing nothing. Rain began tapping against the window, soft and rhythmic. I pulled the blanket higher over Noah and thought about how peace can sound like raindrops on glass, steady, relentless, and earned. And somewhere deep inside that calm, another thought whispered, they still think that was the only card I had to play. Because it wasn't. Not even close. By the end of the day, the ripple had turned into a quiet undertow. Around 6, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Miss Brooks? This is Daniel from Cascade Auto Insurance. I just wanted to confirm the policy on Rick Brooks's vehicle has officially lapsed 5 days overdue. We sent several notices. He sounded uncomfortable, the way people do when they realize they've stepped into someone else's family drama. I'm not listed as the payer anymore, I said evenly. You'll need to contact the account holder directly. He hesitated. Understood. I'll make a note of that. 2 hours later, Mom texted. Police pulled your father over, tail light out. They towed the truck because the insurance expired. He's shaken up. There was no accusation in her words this time, just a small crack of self-awareness. Then another message followed. He says it's his fault. He should have checked. That was new. In my family, fault was always someone else's department. I stood by the kitchen counter, lights dim, listening to the hum of the fridge. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt the air shifting. Consequences had finally found their rightful owners. After dinner, when Noah was in the shower, humming the theme from his robot show, I opened the old finance spreadsheet stored in a password-protected folder. Rows and rows of transactions glowed under the blue light of the screen. Rent top-ups, utility payments, dental surgery co-pays, Christmas gifts I bought from everyone. Each line carried a small date and a note. I scrolled until I reached the bottom. The total blinked up at me, $42,760. My chest tightened not from regret, but recognition. I clicked into the notes column and typed one sentence. Don't count to collect. Count to remember what you carried. I saved the file and closed it. Outside, the Portland rain had started again, gentle but steady, the kind that makes the whole city smell, like wet cedar and old stone. I cracked the kitchen window, let the scent wash in. When I walked out to check the mailbox, the air was cold enough to sting my fingers. Inside the box sat a small padded envelope, the kind used for jewelry. No return address, just my name in careful, slanted handwriting. I tore it open right there under the porch light. Inside was a folded piece of cardstock, torn from a school notebook, and a short note written in purple marker. Aunt Lena, I'm sorry. Mom says I shouldn't write, but I want to. My violin competition is next week. I really want you and Noah to come. Taped to the corner of the card was a tiny woven bracelet made of embroidery thread pink and blue, uneven knots. My son's name stitched across it. The last letter, A, was missing. She must have run out of space. The bracelet was frayed at the edges, probably cut from her wrist in a hurry. I could picture her sneaking into the kitchen, slipping it into an envelope before her mother noticed. For a moment, I just stood there, the rain ticking on the railing, the letter soft in my hand. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even closure. But it was the first honest thing anyone from that house had sent me in years. I turned off the porch light, went back inside, and placed the bracelet on the counter next to Noah's half-finished robot parts. The threads caught the glow from the lamp, one missing letter, one small apology, dangling between what was lost and what might still be rebuilt. The bracelet stayed on the counter for 2 days before I could look at it without feeling that tight twist in my chest. By the third morning, guilt had cooled into clarity. One last thread still tied me to them, the cafe loan. I had co-signed that short-term business credit line when Madison wanted to remodel, Juniper and Rye. Now the balloon payment was 35 days away, and the renewal couldn't go through without my signature. Without it, the cafe would have to sell or default. I opened the digital file, blue ink initials beside hers. The coffee maker sputtered behind me. Noah sat at the table, soldering wires for his robot arm. "What's it supposed to do?" I asked. "Stop when it's gone too far," he said. The words landed harder than he meant them to. That afternoon, a courier dropped off 2 gift bags. No card. A navy hoodie, Noah's size, tag still on, and a Lego spike set, the exact model he'd circled in a catalog weeks ago. Madison's version of apology money wrapped in silence. At 9:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. "We need to talk. Please help. The cafe's restructuring." Still no mention of the dinner. Still no, "I'm sorry." The next morning, before sunrise, Mom texted, "Bank says they can't renew without your signature. Don't let your sister lose everything." Think about the kids. Always the kids. The same ones who laughed at mine. That afternoon, Noah and I went out for ice cream. Mint chocolate, so cold it burned the tongue. He watched the rain slide down the shop window. "Do you think we'll ever go back there?" he asked. "Maybe," I said. "When things change." He nodded like he understood what adults never do. Peace sometimes needs distance. A few days later, Ethan called. His voice shook like he'd rehearsed being calm. "Vera from Cascadia Credit Union copied you, right? They need your co-signature." "I saw it," I said. "You'll sign?" "I haven't decided." He started to explain about payroll, vendors, reputation. I let him talk until the silence embarrassed him. Then he hung up. Time moved in small domestic loops. Work, school runs, quiet dinners. Every now and then I'd catch myself waiting for the next ring of my phone and remind myself, silence was a choice I'd earned. 2 weeks passed before Dad's message arrived. The longest voicemail of my life. Family doesn't cut each other off. Money comes and goes, but blood doesn't. You're teaching your son the wrong lessons. I saved it in a folder called Receipts 2025. Not to replay, just proof of how guilt echoes. As the deadline crept closer, the city shifted into spring. Wet leaves stuck to sidewalks, coffee shops smelled of rain and espresso. One evening, Ethan texted again, stripped of pride this time. "If you don't sign, I understand. I'm sorry about that night." The first honest words any of them had sent. I read them twice, waiting to feel anger, but only exhaustion came. I opened my notebook, the one that still held columns of numbers from every favor I'd done. On a fresh page, I wrote a single line. "I'll sign when they understand that help is earned, not owed." That was the whole deal. No lectures, no list of rules. If they wanted the cafe, they'd have to hold it up on their own credit and conscience. I typed a short note to the bank. Transfer of guarantor liability to Madison Cole and Ethan Cole. My signature authorizes release only. No drama, no extra explanation. Just the clean break that had taken me 30 years to make. That night, Noah fell asleep on the couch, the new hoodie soft under his chin, the Lego box open beside him. The pieces caught the lamplight, like tiny mirrors. I watched him breathe, slow and steady, and thought about leverage, not as power, but as balance. The same way his robot arm would learn to stop before breaking what it held. A week before the balloon payment was due, an email arrived from Vera Halvorsen at the bank, polite but firm. "Please confirm your intent by Friday to allow sufficient processing time." I typed a reply, then erased it. I wanted them to sweat a little longer, not from spite, but from education. The following evening, I took Noah for a walk through the park. The trees were still dripping from rain. The air smelled of moss and cold metal. He ran ahead, shoes slapping puddles, laughter carrying across the empty path. I realized I hadn't heard that sound in months, pure, unguarded joy. At home, I sat by the window while he built his robot, pieces clicking in rhythm. My laptop chimed again, another reminder from the bank. 35 days left, shrinking to 7. I closed the notification and opened a new document instead, personal terms of forgiveness. I wrote, "I will help when help no longer costs my peace." Then I hit save. Outside, the streetlights came on one by one, gold halos, bleeding through the mist. The world was quiet except for the soft whir of Noah's robot arm testing its movement. It lifted, paused, stopped exactly where it should. I smiled, finally understanding the lesson he'd built into it. Sometimes the hardest part of strength isn't holding on, it's knowing when to stop. And for the first time, I was certain I had. The night before the deadline, I couldn't sleep. I watched the rain slide across the window, each drop slow and deliberate, like the world reminding me that endings don't always crash, they fade. By 6, I gave up on pretending to rest. The city outside was half awake, streetlights blinking against a gray sky. I made coffee, pulled on a jacket, and drove into downtown Portland. The streets were slick, buses sighing past puddles, the world smelling of wet pavement and caffeine. Inside Cascadia Credit Union, the air was cold and bright. The receptionist recognized me and waved me through. Vera, the loan officer, was waiting behind a stack of papers. She didn't ask questions, she just pointed where to sign. The amendment was simple. Every financial obligation from that cafe loan would now belong to Madison and Ethan. My name was there only to release what I'd once carried. It was a quiet, satisfying erasure. When I finished signing, I asked Vera to hold the notifications for one more day. "Tomorrow morning," I said. "Let them find out after they've had a full night to imagine the worst." She nodded, professional and silent. Back outside, the drizzle had turned to mist. I took a long breath and felt something loosen between my ribs, a small space I hadn't realized was missing. At home, Noah was building something new out of leftover Lego pieces. "You were gone early," he said without looking up. "I had a few things to take care of. Work?" "Kind of," I said. "Just finishing something important." He nodded, satisfied. The way kids trust that adults know what they're doing always breaks me a little. I made pancakes while he talked about school projects and which of his friends could climb the highest on the jungle gym. Ordinary things. The smell of butter filled the kitchen, and for the first time, it didn't remind me of anyone else's table. By mid-morning, the messages started coming in. Ethan first 3 missed calls, 1 short text. "Did you sign? Please respond." Then Madison, "We need to talk before the bank moves forward." I read them once and put the phone face down on the counter. At noon, Mom's name flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed. Her voice was tight, the tone of someone balancing fear and pride. "Your sister's anxious. She said she hasn't heard from you. Maybe just tell her what you decided." I didn't. They would know soon enough. That afternoon, I drafted 2 emails, short, clear, final. One to Vera, confirming everything was in order, asking her to release the update the next morning at 10. Another to Ethan, stating that I had completed my part and that any further questions should go directly to the bank. I mentioned the repayment plan, $500 a month, starting the 15th, and added one quiet reminder at the end. If we ever sit down together again, let it be in peace, not in performance. No threats. No moral speech, just facts. When I hit send, my inbox looked still for the first time in years. Noah came into the kitchen with his half-built robot. "It doesn't balance." "Right," he said. "Maybe it needs less weight on one side," I suggested. He tested it, adjusted a small piece, and the arm steadied. "See?" he grinned. "It just had to find the middle." I smiled, because somehow he'd described my entire week. Later that day, we walked down to the ice cream shop. The air had that clean smell it gets right after rain, sharp and alive. Noah ordered mint chocolate, I took vanilla. We sat on a metal bench watching traffic crawl by. He asked, "Do you think Aunt Madison's still mad?" "Maybe," I said, "but that's not my job to fix anymore." He nodded. "Good. You already fixed too much." Back home, we made dinner simple pasta, garlic, and olive oil. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. Instead, I told Noah to pick a movie. He chose a documentary about sharks, something he'd already watched twice. Halfway through, he leaned against my shoulder and said, "You're not mad anymore, right?" "No," I said. "I'm just done." He smiled at the TV, satisfied, and that was enough explanation for both of us. When he finally went to bed, I sat alone in the quiet apartment. The only light came from the laptop screen, glowing on the dining table. I opened a blank document and wrote a single line for myself. "Forgiveness is letting go of what keeps asking to be explained." Then, I closed the lid. The rain started again, softer this time. I walked to the window, watching reflections ripple across the glass. In the distance, the city's lights shimmered through the mist, small, patient, steady. Tomorrow morning, Madison and Ethan would get the official notice. The loan would belong entirely to them, and the weight would finally shift. They'd call, probably. They'd panic, maybe. But I wouldn't answer, not right away. They needed a day to sit in the silence they'd built. I turned off the lamp and stood in the half-dark room, listening to the steady hum of Noah's robot on his desk, its arm lifting and pausing midair like it understood restraint better than any of us. The world outside was quiet, almost kind. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for holding anyone else together. Tomorrow they'd see the truth written in their inboxes. Tomorrow they'd know that I hadn't disappeared. I'd simply stepped out of the storm they kept calling family, and by then, I'd be free enough to breathe. The invitation came a week later, handwritten, not typed. Just a short note from Madison. Dinner. No phones, no speeches. Come if you want to start over. I read it twice before deciding, not because I doubted her, but because peace shouldn't be rushed. When I told Noah, he shrugged. Easy as ever. "If it's bad, we just leave," he said. Saturday evening, we drove out to Lake Oswego. The sun was low, washing the houses in orange light. I'd been here before, but it felt different, smaller somehow. The air smelled of basil and tomato, and when Madison opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the sound of clattering pans. Real cooking, not the staged. Perfection of that first dinner. Inside, the table was simple. Pasta bubbling on the stove, garlic bread warming in the oven, mismatched plates stacked at one end. And there, in front of 2 chairs, were name cards, one for me, one for Noah, and 2 small packages wrapped in old newspaper comics. Noah smiled when he saw them. "That's funny," he whispered. "They used Spider-Man. Everyone was already seated. No one reached for their phones. No one pretended." Madison cleared her throat. "We made a rule," she said quietly. "Phones down, truth only, one thing each." She started first. "I forgot who you were," she said, voice shaking but steady. "And I forgot that this house even exists because of you." Mom looked up next. For the first time in 2 years, she met my eyes without looking away. "I'm sorry," she said, "for letting small things grow so big they became hard to forgive." Dad shifted in his chair, fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "I learned how to call the bank myself," he said, almost smiling. "They said it wasn't that hard. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real." When it was Noah's turn, he looked around the table, then at the little box in front of him. "I like the Lego," he said simply. Everyone laughed, not nervously this time, just softly. I didn't make a speech. I didn't need to. I watched them really talk for the first time without me translating, managing, or fixing. The room no longer needed me as glue. It could hold itself together. After dinner, Madison handed Noah a napkin to clean the sauce off his face, and he laughed when she smudged a little more on his cheek. It was messy, honest, normal, the way family should have been all along. When we stood to leave, Mom hugged me. Not long, not performative, just enough. Dad squeezed my shoulder, awkward but sincere. Madison followed us to the porch. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You didn't have to." "I know," I said. "That's why it means something." The evening air smelled of wet grass and cooling pasta. Noah ran ahead to the car, waving the Lego box like a trophy. I stood for a moment on the porch, listening to the muffled laughter inside. This time, it didn't feel like I was walking away from family. It felt like I was walking into a version of it that didn't demand pieces of me to exist. On the drive home, Noah leaned back in his seat and said, "It felt different this time. It was," I said. "They finally stood up on their own. And for once, I didn't feel the need to carry anyone. I'd closed the old role, opened a new door, one where they could stand, and I could breathe." The auditorium at Maple Ridge Elementary smelled like every school event I'd ever been to: floor wax, paper programs, and nervous energy. Rows of folding chairs creaked as parents settled in, whispering over the sound of instruments tuning. The stage lights glowed soft yellow, catching dust in the air like glitter. Noah sat beside me, swinging his legs. He was holding a small bouquet of white daisies we'd picked up from the grocery store. "Do you think she'll see us?" he whispered. "She'll see you," I said. When the curtains opened, the room went quiet. A line of kids stood behind music stands, bows poised. Then, at the far right, I saw Olivia hair pulled back, violin trembling just a little under her chin. Madison and Ethan sat 2 rows ahead, still as statues. The music began, light and uneven, like the rain outside. Halfway through the piece, Olivia missed a beat. The sound faltered for a second, a small, human mistake. A few heads turned. Then she took a breath, found her rhythm again, and finished the song without another slip. When the final note faded, the applause rose like a wave. I clapped until my palms stung. Noah's daisies rustled as he joined in, his smile wide and proud. Olivia looked toward the audience then just for a second, and when she saw us, her shoulders eased. After the show, families gathered in the hall, all chatter and camera flashes. Madison approached slowly, her daughter at her side. Olivia held out the violin program folded in half. "I messed up," she said, eyes low. "You fixed it," I answered. She nodded, then glanced at Noah. "You still like robots?" He grinned. "More than ever." For a moment, the 4 of us stood in the noise and warmth of that hallway, not as villains or victims, just as people trying again. Madison said nothing, only smiled, faint but real. When Noah and I stepped outside, the sky had cleared. The pavement smelled of rain and the faint sweetness of spring blossoms. He took my hand, the bouquet now missing a few petals. "They did better tonight," he said. "Yeah," I said. "They did." We walked across the parking lot, the sound of violins fading behind us. The air was cool, bright with that quiet sense of renewal Portland gets after a storm. At the car, Noah turned to me. "So, are we a family again?" I thought about it. The long chain of dinners, debts, silences, and small attempts to start over. "We always were," I said. "We just had to grow into it." He nodded, satisfied, and climbed into the passenger seat. As I started the engine, I looked once more toward the school's glowing windows. Inside, laughter echoed, faint, but steady. Family, I realized, wasn't the people you carried. It was the ones who learned to walk beside you.